Hey everybody, Jam Creates here. Another drive time video, driving home in the car on the way home from work. So you're going to hear car sounds. Vroom, vroom. Well, real car sounds, not ridiculous fake car sounds made by my mouth. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about a subject today. Something that it's been going over, and I think I've mentioned it in the past too. I just figured maybe I'd give it a little bit more of a spotlight now, is the idea of I guess what I would call them is Evergreen Comics. Wow, somebody needs brakes worked. Anyway, there's the concept of Evergreen Comics, and what I mean by that is comic books that are forever, that are timeless. In much the same way there are movies that are evergreen movies and books that are evergreen and things of that nature. Comic books have some stuff that's like that. They definitely do. There are some comics in the history of comic books that are certainly evergreen, things like The Killing Joke or Dark Knight Returns. A standalone story that you can read, and the greater continuity of the universe of that character or that company is irrelevant. You understand it. You can get in. You could have never read a comic book before, and you could read that and understand what's happening. And it's something that you can go back and reread, again and again, and get new things out of it and enjoy it. Generally, the reason why there aren't that many of those is the fact that comic books generally don't exist as a standalone thing. Generally speaking, the history of comic books for the last, 80 years has been a continual story. They're a soap opera. It's a story that just keeps going and going. Now, yes, there have been some story arcs that you probably could just jump into and read and enjoy. There are individual issues here or there that are great standalone stories that you wouldn't need to really know the characters or any of the history in order to enjoy them. But when you really stop and think about it, most of them require some foreknowledge of the characters and the world they inhabit and the things that have happened before. And so generally, listen, these are things that, if you continued the numbers, you're talking issues, 800 and things of that nature. Like, these things have been going for a long, long time. And that is a long story to ask people to continue to read, to ask new people to jump into. Now, I have always said that the constant rebooting is a horrible idea. People like that history. I know I did when I jumped into comic books. I jumped in and I was completely baffled by the things I was reading. When they would mention, look back into this issue, or when someone would mention, oh yeah, that's when so-and-so, did this or did that. And I'd be like, what? I don't even know who that is. What does that mean? And, they would always give you the little thing, see issue, 132, whatever. And you know what? There were times when I would track down an old issue and read it just to see what happened, because it sounded like something interesting. Or I would ask a friend who did read it and be like, dude, do you know what this is, what they were talking about? And you would find out. And so, people are capable of jumping in midstream of a story. And that's fine if that's what you're doing. If you're Marvel and DC, I wouldn't expect you to change, but I would love it if you would actually respect the history that came before. But that's not what this video is about. I'm getting a little off topic here. What I'm talking about is new comics. Okay, if you're making new comics, I think the idea of trying to launch a monthly book that is just going to go on indefinitely is a terrible idea. Not from a creative standpoint. I think from a creative standpoint, you certainly could do something amazing. The Walking Dead was fantastic for a good long time. Invincible was something that was really great. Yeah, I know, I just mentioned 2 Robert Kirkman books. But otherwise, if you're an indie creator and you're going to try and put something new out there, I think the way to go is much like I'm sure if you listen at all to Comic Artist Pro Secrets, you've heard Ethan say this before. He wants people to stop thinking about comic books like, or at least for his comics, he wants people to not think about comics like a soap opera and think of them more like Harry Potter, where there's a book, and then you read that book and you talk about that book to others, and not everyone reads the book at the same time. People discover it on their own, and you can always read that book. Someone brand new can read the first Harry Potter book right now and suddenly be really into Harry Potter, because it's a timeless story. It's not really dated in any way, and that was, I'm sure, done on purpose. It's much like Star Wars. The films, Star Wars, were done to be classic. They purposely tried to make them so that nothing would remind anyone of Earth. That's why there's no zippers on any of the costume. That was literally an edict put out by George Lucas. No zippers to the costume department. No zippers, because zippers are something we have on Earth. We don't want it to look like something on Earth. It's just a thing. It's a weird thing to kind of obsess on. But, hey, that's part of it, Don't make silly jokes about, like, current memes or current things going on, because that wouldn't make any sense. And I'm not just talking about Star Wars, but when you make your own book, if it's heavily invested in the current culture, it is not going to be a timeless book. It's just not. It's going to age poorly, and, people might look at it as a weird anachronism of the times in which it was created, and people could still enjoy something that is very dated, just for the reasons of that. It was funny, I was reading I did a video about the Fathom Omnibus, and I was reading it, and I forgot sometimes when that book was made. Like, I was just reading it, and it was like, because it was new to me, it was new, but then every once in a while, someone would make a reference to a band or a song, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot this was made in the 90s. It's just, that's what happens. Like, when you make references to things, you instantly date it, and it's easy enough to date something with clothing styles or hairdos or even the art styles can, of course, date a comic book. But if you want your thing to be timeless, you kind of have to, your art style is going to be what your art style is going to be. And I really don't think you should compromise that based on the time, the era. If you draw like a 90s Rob Liefeld, copycat, hey, more power to you. Then that's the way you draw. You know what? Who cares? Like, that's all good. And if you draw like more of an animated style or whatever, and that's the way you draw it, then dude, then that's fine. That's the way you draw, and it's cool. I don't care. Like, that's never going to be a thing that's going to turn me off. Different art styles are cool. I like to see different art styles. And different art styles fit different stories better than other art styles do. So the point really is, if you're releasing something, if you want it to be an evergreen thing, and this is what Ethan is talking about, and he hasn't used that word, that term, but this is what he means. He wants to put out the first Cyberfrog, right? And then he wants to put out another one, like 2 years later or a year and a half later or whatever it ends up being, because he is going to do another project in between. But he wants that first one to be like, here it is. This is the first Cyberfrog book, just like that was the first Harry Potter book. And then later on, there's a new Harry Potter. Hey, there's a new Harry Potter book. Cool. I'm going to read the new Harry Potter book. Oh, but somebody else says, oh, but I never read the first one, but I know people liked it, and they say this one's good too. Maybe I'll go back and I'll buy the first one, and then I'll read this one afterwards. And people have done that with Harry Potter for years now. That's what people do with book series. They've done that with Lord of the Rings. They've done it with everything. These things are evergreen. And yes, the fantasy nature of certain things helps them to be evergreen because they're not grounded in a reality, which is, it's difficult. When you're going to ground something in a reality, it's tough to make it an evergreen subject, because it is just inherently going to be dated by whatever time it takes place in and whatever world it takes place in. If it takes place in our world, in a realistic environment, it could be tough to make that an evergreen thing. But what the point is It's not an ongoing thing. It's not, hey, here we go. Here's a number 1. And now we're going to just do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and on and on and on until people lose interest and the book gets canceled. What he was saying is you're going to have these standalone books, and think of it like a movie, I guess. Think of it like a Harry Potter book, or think of it like a movie. Movie sequels are part of a larger story. Harry Potter books are all part of a larger story once it's all put together, but each one is its own individual book and its own individual story. And that's what he's trying to get people to think of with these indie books that they're putting out, that people are doing these crowdfunding campaigns for. He's saying, think of them this way. And I agree with him. I do think that's the way for indie creators. If you're going to do a crowdfunded book, that's the way to do it. Now, if you can find a publisher who's willing to help you put out a mini-series or something like that, that's another way to go, and that's fine. If you're going to put out a mini-series, something through Alterna, you guys know how I love Alterna, something like Blood Realm. Blood Realm is 3 issues. The 3rd issue is coming out later this month, and it's a story, and it's going to be a whole story, and that's it. And then later in the year, they are going to do another one, but that's going to be another story. Again, it's not an ongoing monthly book that asks you to buy in every single month and keep track of all the minutia and everything else. No, you're just going to buy these and move on, and then you're going to come back to that world when a new story is released. And I think these are the ways to do it. I think Alterna is right to do only limited series or one-shots and to not do ongoing books. I think they're right to do that. I think that's a better, more feasible market, more viable way of doing business in the comic book industry of today, especially when you're a smaller company or an independent who's just out there on your own. I look at somebody like, let's say Cautionary Comics, right? Ben Hennessy, he's doing his, I call him Ben, it's Ben Henderson, but his name is Ben Hennessy online. He's doing Ravage, Kill All Men. He did a crowdfunder for the first one, and the stretch goals enabled them to get going even with the second one. And what he's going to do is he's going to do another Indiegogo, because obviously the first one was very successful. He's going to do another one for the whole rest of the series. So basically, if you bought into the first one, you're getting that first issue and you're getting the other perks that go with it. And then the new crowdfunder, you can get the first issue again. So if you didn't pick up the first one, you can. And if you did, you can still get the whole rest of the story. So you're going to get that whole story. So I think these are interesting ways to do this, but they are what they are. And they're going to be, you need to make a book that can be read and reread and resold. And that's the point. You need them to be able to be resold over and over in the future. Not so that they're so dated and so, out of date, or, hey, guess what? We changed all our continuity. We rebooted everything. So everything that happened before is now erased from history, didn't happen, and thus renders all those books completely worthless. That's what drives collectors crazy and fans crazy. It drives retailers crazy, because now they can't sell those old books because those old books essentially don't exist. If you're trying to catch up with the mythology of a series or whatever, those old books, they don't matter anymore because they just don't exist anymore. That history has been erased. And that's a shame. That's the problem when you're doing a monthly format of doing monthly floppies, and then you suddenly decide, yeah, we're just going to start all over now and erase that. Well, you know what? The people who were on board and enjoying that stuff, they may not come back. And the new ones, maybe you'll get some, maybe you won't. You're taking a real chance there. But eventually you just tick off everybody, because if you did it once, you'll probably do it again. So the point is creating these self-contained, it's a one-shot. I mean, it could be a graphic novel. It could be 48 pages, 64 pages, 100 pages, 1,000,000 pages. It doesn't matter. It's a self-contained story. You can read it. You can pass it to your friend. You can read it again. when a new one comes out, you can go back and read it. If you didn't read it before, maybe you can pick it up. And that's going to be the hard part with some of this stuff, is getting new readers on board. There's going to have to be options for them to be able to get the first one, because comic book fans by nature are completists and collectors, and they want everything. So anyway, that's just my thought on this model of creating evergreen books that people will want to continue to buy, even when they're over. Like, let's say, I mean, he said Cyberfrog is going to be a 4-book series. So when those 4 books are over, you still want them to be desirable for people. You're going to want them still to be where people want to buy them so that they can read them. You know, people still buy Harry Potter books right now. There hasn't been a new Harry Potter book in quite some time. People still buy them because they want to read them. They want to read the whole series. And that's what they do. They buy the entire series because that's what they want to read. So it's the same thing with comic books. If you have something that's self-contained like that, I do think it makes it just an easier purchase for somebody, because they know there's an end. They know, they're like, I can buy this and then I'm done. And I don't have to keep just buying in perpetuity for the rest of my life, spending $5 a month on what could be a good comic, what could be a crappy comic, you know. So anyway, tell me what you think about this whole idea of an evergreen comic, of the way that EVS is talking about doing his books, and a lot of these other crowdfunders are doing their books. Let me know if you think that's a good deal. I do. I think it's a good idea. If you don't think it's a good idea, let me know too. I'd love to hear, differing opinions on that. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. We're up to, I think, 34, 35 subscribers now. We're slowly chugging along, baby. So that's it. I always, comment on the video. I respond to every comment I get, because I really don't get that many comments. So, now's the time. If you want to interact, now is the time. Don't wait until I become so popular that I want nothing to do with any of you people. No, I'm kidding. I will always have time to respond to people, because I will make time. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to go have dinner, and let me go through the deal. Okay, you know the deal anyway. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, follow me on Twitter @jam_creates. I'm on Minds. My videos are also mirrored on BitChute, so if you prefer that platform, go over there. I've got like 7 subscribers on BitChute. Thumbs up to you dudes. Special shout out to my BitChute subscribers. And that's it. I will talk to you soon. Peace.